A wake of fog curling around my feet and then bleeding to it like memory. The first breath testers of cold ozone and the ghost of spoon sugar. A sweetness that turned metallic against the back of my teeth. And for a long, bewildered instant, I allow myself to believe I have stumbled into a city that simply forgot to sleep. There is a hardness at the back of me skull that feels like judgment, a small, specific asset has been waiting for this moment all along, patient as sediment. The midway waits beyond a row of brown litter and a rusted session. The lights pull in the hazy like bruises, steel and sand smeared with a thin, accusing red. My hands are empty except for the habit. A worn leather jacket clinging to my shoulders and a tarnished silver ring on my right hand that I half remember being once because it felt like armor. A folded Carnival wristband peeks from under my watch strap, damp and familiar in a way that makes my chest hollow. Unsure of a night I told myself it had already catalogued and shelved. It does not feel like chance. The street is wrong in the way that only places created from memory can be wrong. Corners sharpened, shadows placed too deliberately, a path encouraging me forward. There is geometry here that knows the angles of my avoidance. The shortcuts may conscience use it or take. Compulsion is the first honest sensation. Not curiosity, not fear, but an unbearable mechanical pull toward the way that feels less like an invitation than an accusation. I take a step because taking a step feels inevitable. Because the fog seems to press behind me, and because the neon lights set a rhythm that matches the pulse under my ribs. The Carnival stands, square baby empty pavement and cracked storefronts, the Ferris wheel turning slow as if time itself were being wound down by a hand that knows me. Each creak and clack a syllable in a language I refuse to speak aloud. I notice the small things first, the details that prelude memory with the slow professional passions of a coroner. A torn poster flaps like a skin on a rusty post, the same smear of paint along its that pricks the part of my thumb when I brushed past. The sound it makes, a single reluctant slap against metal, sounds like a gin being done in a leisure that had once kept me secret. A ticket stop lodged in the gutter reads numbers that mean nothing until they begin to rearrange themselves into that I have kept folded away for years. Those numbers are not merely marks, they are a breadcrumb trail I had convinced myself I resist. These minutiae are not comfort, they implicate. They are the Carnival's fingerprints, left with the meticulous cruelty of someone who catalogues false-like specimens. The ticket booth stands abandoned, a glass-faced jeweled with the same film-grain haze that hangs over the entire place. Inside, a register is open and empty, and yet there is a trace of warmth beneath a pile of dust. As if someone had only just stepped away and would return to find me trespassing. The emptiness feels staged, like a pile to hell I will confess. The midway draws me deeper with lamps that cast teal and red halos. Igla becomes a finger pointing, each shadow a margin note in a book I refuse to read aloud. The light critiques corridors of meaning, till where memory's soft red where it sharpens into accusation. Litter moves at my feet, a crumbled paper program, a broken plastic horse eye, the dry smear of something that could be paint or blood. And my fingers flex around a memory I cannot name without being split open. The air is thick with sound. The distant, slow rustle music like a lullaby pulled through water. A soft metallic creak when the breeze touches the Ferris wheel. An echo of laughter that never qualms into a shape. That laughter is an instrument to unthaw the exact pitch of my shame. It scratches at my ribs until I feel the wanting to confess. To map the wound out loud so that it might be sewn up with words. I find the mirrors in a narrow alley between rise. They are broken not by violence but by time, spatter wet glass turning my reflection into a series of small lies. The shards throw me back in fragments. One shard gives me the back of my head, another gives me the long, gaunt face I usually keep tucked inside bone and habit. My reflection multiplies into versions of myself I have negotiated with and versions I have elided. A warped section throws back a scene that is not happening here, and I filled with wrong choices, a silhouette pushed away, a door closed and bolted. The image rearranges itself until the memory presses out into my palms, a choice disguised as a mercy, a hand let go that should have been held. The boundary between what correct and what the carnival insists upon blurs until I cannot tell whether I'm remembering or being reminded by something that is older and more patient than regret. It is as though the mirrors do not merely reflect light but excavate, carving away varnish until what remains is ugly and accurate. At the edge of the Ferris wheel shadow, the loving clown waves as if in a slow-motion dream. It got not moved like a man. It slides, a figure total for the wheel shadow, limbs exaggerated into a purposeful grace. The proportions are wrong in a way that makes a part of me register it as a lie, and another part readies itself for penance. Its face is a cracked canvas, paint fissuring into lines that look almost like maps, routes that lead to the nice it also make what is. The green is too wide, stitched into the skin like a verdict, a permanent expression as seen by someone more ruthless than fate. Yellow eyes glow under heavy lids and watch me an intimacy younger in time and older than cruelty. It stands in rim light, still glancing one cheek, a smear of red catching the other. And there is a rusted brass bell at its side has known many hands and many confessions. When it claps, the sound is lyred. A small chill ziggle pitched over the rasp of an old chain. The clap feels like applause for a crime I am only just remembering, and its patience feels surgical. As though it could cut along the seam between action and rationalization until the latter peels away. I move toward a flickering red lamp and feel confession form in me more like a foreign word. The urge to say something, anything, goes there, absurd and immediate. I try to decide whether speaking would shift anything. Would naming the thing is it great the scales? There is a belief in me chest that to set it down in language might unburden me. That to make the sin concrete would allow it to be lifted. Get the thought of making it real with a voice tightens the throat. The compulsion is not to confess to another person. The compulsion is to face the truth. To let press against me skin with the same force the carnival has used it to build itself around me. To speak would be to give the carnival the thing it wants, to furnish it with an eyewitness, a code. My breath fogs as the lamp stutters, and the laughter moves through the midway like a tie, small and low and unending. A tie that leaves behind a residue like salt across everything I touch. The ticket booth reveals detail that breaks me more than any grand revelation could. Tucked in a corner is a scrap of cloth with a telltale turn that matches the lining of a jacket I once saw in a photograph. That photograph had been folded into a wallet I never opened. The image folded under things like receipts and bus passes until it became a smudge. A smear of red crimson stains the corner of the paper. The sight of it makes the memory rearrange itself fully and with terrible clarity. A night when hands were not steady, when a decision made by someone who thought himself they were protecting another from something worse. In that memory, motives were double-bound by fear and the slow calculus of what would cause less damage, and I told myself then, and have told myself since, that the choice was the lesser evil. It is a private calculus I once told myself would be swallowed by time. Standing under the lamp, I can feel the bargain break. The carnival has not only found me, it has been keeping its score, and it is even stirred with arithmetic than I had presumed. The mirrors continue to betray me. One reflection shows not my face, but a version of events as if filmed through someone else's eye, the tremor of a finger on a trigger. The certainty of a world that had been composed of small certainties. That angle reveals things that insight simplifies and cleans up. Seen like this, the images is ragged, disproportionate, human error may manifest. The carousel mirrors fold and scrape the past together until a verdict becomes visible. Intention and consequence braided into a rope heavy enough to pull me under. The clatter of metal on metal nearby becomes the clang of good as it falls. And I realize the carnival does not only expose, it officiates. It arranges memory into a trial in which I have always been the accused and the juror. A court with no judge other than the slow, relentless chemistry of recognition. No jury could be impartial here because the witness box contains my own face, and my eyes present testimony that no player can unmake. From beyond the central rye gate the loving queen steps forward and the air changes. The soundscape compresses into thin, dot notes. Low ambient rumbles that seem to originate from the earth under my feet. A heartbeat pulls under the bass of distant, distorted calliope. Its head tilts in a way that should not be possible, a caricature of curiosity that reads like mockery. There is a rusted gate, vast and ornate, that swings with a wheezy calibrate of time itself. I find myself at the threshold. The vision it forces on me is not cinematic but intimate, small and precise. I see the eyes of the person I file it, eyes that did not know the consolation of explanation, only the finality of being let go. They look like a question that has been turned into an accusation. The memory presses like a mold and every detail fits where it once resided. The half-spoken apologies, the Daniel turned to silent, the sustained, overlooked need. The sound of someone I love asking when being given anything but an answer is a sound I had been avoiding by staying busy with excuses and the soft work of pretending. I cannot tear my gaze away as the alone shows me the exact geometry of turquoise and consequences. The moment of breaking is not sudden like a clap. It is slow and fusing, an entropy that bends the world inward. I feel the old, bleeding question, would confession free me? Fall under the weight of something simpler and crueler. The realization that something cannot be made light again by speak alone. The decision I made live in the dark because it had to live somewhere. I had tucked it into Daniel and let that Daniel warm like a secret hearth. The Carnival has followed me precisely because that place is a kind of habitation, a room in me constructed of evasion and warm Daniel. The loving clone does not demand that I say it aloud. It demands that I feel the scale tip until it cannot be ignored. It presses with a passion it cannot outweigh and with an inevitability it cannot outlast. When the memory completes its work, the midway rearranges. Pathways close and reopen like breath. Lamps shift their halos, and the shadows lengthen until the midway resembles a poem written in the margins of an old ledger. Each line seems inscribed with handwriting I recognize and hate. Living is not a concept anymore. The map between me and the street has been reworked by hands that understand me hesitation. The ticket booth is empty and the Ferris wheel keeps turning. A single blood-dark bounty flutters in a breeze that smells of stale popcorn and iron. The logging clown recedes into the Ferris wheel as shadow, but its presence hangs like a punctuation mark that will not be removed. Even in retreat, it leaves a residue. A tiny shard of its cracked porcelain hanging from a cord, glowing under till lamplight, like a talisman that will lock me into its ledger every time it sees me. The aftermath is a new heaviness, less a release than binding. Sense of inevitability settles like gusts in the scene. I am not so much trapped as enrolled. The Carnival's purpose deepened from exposure into instruction. It has always been a place that appears when the self has nowhere left to run. It waits at the thresholds, patient as rot, until the architecture of avoidance cracks. The gate is closed not to punish in the cruel way that would satisfy learning, but to keep me in a place where inevitability can be taught in slow, intimate lessons. The laughter becomes a metronome marking how long I have left to reckon. I feel like a student pulled off practice and asked it to perform a thing I have only practiced it in the dark. I walk the midway again because walking feels like action, and because standing still in a field of accusation might be worse. Motion steadies me. It is a ritual less about movement than about pretending to progress. The lamps flicker and the mirror throws back my fair if I ask someone else terrible bargain. Hand drop at temples is not one to remember, and have formed louder bubbles of its own accord at times that feel wrong and small. A nervous huff that wants to fill every silence. I find comfort in rituals of avoidance, rubbing the leather of my jacket, finding the rain turning it on my finger, until the Carnival arranges another tableau that unpicks even those movements. A carousel horse, frozen in mid-buck, bears a smear of paint that calls to mind a scar along my left eyebrow. a little thing the world has given permanent store. The correspondences feel cruelly deliberate, as if the world is a patient teacher that uses small, precise pains to remind you where you were colored. By the time morning threatens the horizon and the fog thins into a suggestion, something fundamental has shifted, not forgiven, not forgotten. A new rule exists in the margins. The carnival will not go because it has finally been noticed, because the part of me that hid behind silence has been addressed and can no longer pretend at absence. The midway is quieter, but not safe. The Ferris wheel continues slow turning, indifferent to the smallness of human resolution. The loving clown's bell rings once, a thin, surgical sound that leaves the air itching with cold. I imagine a future in which we to live apart from this place, to stack ordinary days between me and the memory. But the knowledge that the carnival comes for those who room from themselves, settle new habits, a carefulness in me step, a strictness in me avoidance of certain alleys, a watchfulness for till light in the corner of a street lamp. These small precautions feel like the first, fumbling stitches toward a life that just not unravel at a single remembered night. When I finally find the street that leads away, the path behind me has altered in ways I cannot entirely trace. The ticket booth stands like a bone in the wind, and the wristband tucked under my watch feels heavier still, as if it contains more than paper and ink. I carry the memory with me as you would carry a stone you think might take you to be steadier. Sometimes I change hands with it, sometimes I took it into a pocket. Good does not dissolve with movement. It darkens the underside of every day. The carnival has not been a one-night torment. It's been an education in inevitability, the slow, relentless schooling that insists upon self-confrontation until the student becomes incapable of returning to evasion. The loving clown watches from some margin of the eye and, whether or not it returns, has already done what it came to do. It catalogued, named it, and set me to account. The fog that found me at the beginning has become a metaphor I cannot escape. It grows around my feet, then claims me legs, then settles in me lungs, until the world itself filters as if through memory. There is a crisp clarity to this intimacy with consequence. Confession might not be a cure, but the act of seeing and sighing and letting the world rearrange is not meaningless either. There is small, bleak relief in the knowledge that I have been noticed and catalogued with. The carnival keeps its slate clean by naming what hides in the creases of the self, and from that naming is punishment. It is also a certain acknowledgement. Sometimes acknowledgement is the only trade a guilty person can. The fog found me the way an accusation finds a guilty throat, slow, inevitable, settling into the hollow at the base of my skull. I remember opening my eyes to the same impossible teal glow and the same ragged film grain of light that always seems to hang over this place, as if someone practiced the memory of every low winter evening if I tried to forget. The midway stretched ahead like a seam in the world, strings of bulls blinking with the indifferent pageants of distant stars, banners drooped like exhausted witnesses, and the Ferris wheel loomed beyond them, an indifferent lock horse spokes market moment I had hoped to bury. I moved before I had decided to. The body remembers routes the mind would rather not travel. The shoes found the metal grating and the thin residue of damp fabric and rust the way they always had. My jacket, the same worn leather I always wore, made that familiar shoes against my ribs. And when my hand went fluttering on my right finger, it returned into a measure of steadiness. It had long ago bought with smaller compromises. Habit is a dishonest thing that keeps you steady while it takes your measure. I rubbed at my temples because that small, automatic motion came with the rawness of something inside me. Something that tightened every time he crossed thresholds he had thought closed. At the ticket edge the light stuttered like a heart skipping, a poor mimicry of life. Past it, the midway spread itself out in deliberate neglect. Empty pry counters with glass eyes cluttered by just concession stands with their awnings collapsed into the neat pleat of resignation. And rise that blurred the line between promise and threat. It was staged as if for a play where the house watched, but never intervened. An uneasy, childish compulsion drew me forward, An irresistible lift missed my gom, and with it a question I could not shrug away. Where had the carnival followed me here again? That question landed like a blade wrapped in velvet. It with azure certainty that did not bleed but settled. Banners hung from rusted poles along the walkway, their fray ends whispering in a wind that might have been real or might have been memory. They bore faces and fragments, not random but precise. The spotlight of a house I left in the early hours, the name I borrowed from photo albums like a finger smudging ink, a US silhouette frozen mid-June. Each banner pre that seems it had soon shoot with lies and small silences, where I expected only reflection, mere confirmation of continued existence. I found instead a collage of might have beens and the precious moments acquired that let them unravel. The banners were not passive. They were accusation made cloth, and as he passed, they turned their faces toward me like jurors who had already decided. My breath fogged in the lamplight. He paused beneath an advertisement for a game of skill promising prizes and second chances, though here the prizes were only shadows. It was absurd that a carnival could press on so lightly and still feel like some chamber of justice. But was the cruelty of it? Everything was familiar enough to be more painful. The banners whispered with each step I took, as if they had lungs and memory and the inclination to judge. One carried the outline of a compact token he had thought lost, a small, enamel object he had watched uses to smooth an awkward moment into a laugh. Seeing it half buried in printed cloth, I felt a hot surge of shame like a fever. The question in me had sharpened it. What else did I assume was irrevocably gone? Between a ragged carousel, horse-painted horses had long since resigned themselves to a permanent gallop, and a long row of warped mirrors. I caught movement that did not belong to the fog. At first it was only a crooked glint of crimson and chalk white at the periphery, a suggestion more than a presence, but enough to make my breath hitch. Then the loving clown stepped from the shadow with the deliberate showmanship of someone who had been waiting in the wings for precisely this scene. It clapped at once slow, exaggerated, as if following a beat only it could hear. The motion made the compulsion inside me harden into a physical pull toward the mirrors. I found my shoulders rotated like a compass needle toward the hall of glass. The hall of mirrors was a crooked cathedral built of glass and the particular cruelty of reflected truth. Light fractured into long, accusing lines that found the hollows of my face and refused to spare them. Every pen offered a version of me I refused to acknowledge. Gaunt mitities, dark hair that had been pushed back and grown unkempt in the same defeated way for years, eyes the precise gray of old ashen sleeplessness. The scar along my left eyebrow caught rim light and flashed like an old punctuation, a small history of being struck and continuing. Each shot bent the truth at a different angle, so that the same life became multiple confessions. The mirrors did not simply show me, they retraced the exact shape of me avoidance in warped glass. Here, in a long top pen, I looked upward in an empty classroom, me jaw taut and me shoulders set as if to speak. There in a shorter, convex curve, I held a child's hand he had never returned. A silhouette so small in that reflection that the hand might have belonged to a stranger. Another pen elongated my fingers until they looked foreign, spider-limbed and round, the reflections forced detail. A folded carnival wristband tucked under a watch strap, a compact token passed between fingers, the faint pattern of red rust on a bicycle chain. These weren't invented trinkets. They were the intimate, ordinary thing that framed the realms he had promised myself forgotten. Images twisted with a slow malice, a pen doubled a shadow behind me. Small, a chill-edged shadow that moved with memories he had shoved into a locked box. When I tried to look away, my eyes were cocked by that double helix of possibility, the way the shadows overlapped like fingerprints. The hall offered no solace. Instead of comforting, it fostered clarity. Making the trivial grotesque and the rave unbearably mundane, it was precisely because shame is precise. It lives in minutiae, the sound of a step, the placement of a hand, a choice made because the easier hath spared some immediate turmoil. Glass fractured before I realized it might. A mirror in the alcove near the carousel shuddered and shattered, sending glances across the cold floor. The judge rearranged himself into a small accusatory tableau. In one sliver my hands, those hands irrecognized and had fluttered with work and care, resting too heavy on a small shoulder. In another, the crouched silhouette of a child at the lip of a stair. In yet another, the compact token, enamel flecked, laying open atop a folded receipt as if left out habit. Each fragment insisted on sequence. Not an overwhelming tableau, but a chain of choices, each slight and ordinary, that glued together formed a culpability I had tried to deny. A memory cut through the fog with the clinical patience of a film being rewound. I saw it in frames. A door left ajar in the wrong light, hands that moved too quickly, the particular angle of the ceiling in a hospital corridor with its cheap fluorescent hum. I saw my face in one frame, older in a cruelly honest way, with younger teeth clenched around a layer used to make a situation dissolve into silence. I saw the compact token pass from my fingers into my pocket because if something can be lost, it can be hidden. The ring on my hand felt suddenly and emphatically like an accusation. Once it had been promised, now it was a of steadiness that could not be called to account. Shame settled in layers like sediment, something you can pick at and reveal deeper, darker stuff beneath. When the hoop beneath the Ferris wheel took on a certain pressure, the air thickening as the night itself were held in a throat. The loving clown came forward again with the theatrical ease of someone who always knows the cue. It moved with a long-limbed certainty, its ruffled collar smelling faintly of stale popcorn and copper, the bell on its vest a useless potion. It did not speak. Language would have been too keen. Instead, it reoriented the entire night with its presence. The compulsion easy felt as a pull became a demand. My feet answered as if magnetized. I had no idea what the clown intended, and it made no attempt to instruct. This was not a theatre of style, but an execution of memory. It compelled me to watch, the images assembled like the grooves on a phonograph, precise and unblinking. My hand in the frame of a doorway where a deeper, smaller sound, almost silence, was to swallow away the home between rooms, cheap hospital light washing over linoleum. A compact token slid into a pocket as a substitution for courage. The truth landed in me like something that breaks, a rib perhaps, or a confident bone shaped like memory. It was not revelation so much as accounting. Here is what you did, here is what you chose, and the weight of that ledger settled into my chest. Sound in the midway changed. Machinery became a distant murmur until a heartbeat pulse threaded under everything, synchronous with my own, the way a metronome tries to impose order on rhythm. I felt the world tilt and then snap back into a clarity so cruel it felt surgical. Confession trembled at the edge of my mouth. To say the words seemed inevitable and useless in the same breath. Naming the harm would not make the echo of what easy left. The clown's laughter layered itself over the memory like varnish, sticky, stroking, impossible to clean. Those glowing yellow eyes watched me, patient and amused at the shape of me dismay. The clown wanted me to understand that the memory wasn't what would chain me. It was the chain the memory articulated. When it was over, I slumped against cold metal, the Ferris wheel as shadow folding around me like a sentence left unresolved. The midway contracted into a cruelty that bore down with the subtlety of winter, small, precise, and absolute. The Carnival did not demand atonement. It demanded the naming of the thing. It offered a mirror, a bell, a rusted gate, each a prop in a ceremony it had not consented to, but which I nevertheless performed. Confession felt like an emaciated promise. Uselessness settled in like an unwelcome guest who knows how to make themselves comfortable. The fog thinned as if the rice themselves sighed and let their breath out. Something fluttered at my feet with a softness that made my skin prickle. A ticket, small, the color of old blood, came to rest at my shoulder. Stained as if from an old wound, it whispered against the metal and threatened to mean more than its simple shape. The logging clown watched me with something like curiosity, gauging whether I would make the next move. There was no instruction, only a sense of an unspoken choice. pick up the ticket and step to that rusted door, or let it lie and walk away into a life already stained. I crouched and pressed my fingers to the paper. The ticket was re-encrusted finely of grease, and alone when my skin brushed it, an absurdly intimate detail that flashed and receded. No name was written on it. There was only a number that matched neither logic nor calendar, as if meant to refer to a place outside of ordinary time. For a moment the world slowed to the grain of that paper beneath my skin. The Carnival felt like a thing holding two doors open, one leading to some fragile, possibly useless reconciliation, the other to acceptance of a weight that would sit like a stone and never be later. Standing with ticket folded in my palm like a talisman of failure, I watched the clown step back and clap again, his movement deliberate and as light as a guillotine. It did not push me. That was not its manner. Instead, it offered the demonstration of how close choice and consequence can be, the way a tiny emotion makes catastrophe inevitable. With pain cracked and one false tooth missing, wound stitched into its painted cheeks, it grinned, part mockery, part benediction, and let me feel how the two options coexisted. The chance to name and attempt to repair, and the acceptance that some things do not forgive easily. I went to the ticket booth as if pulled by gravity rather than volition. The lantern over it flickered a sick deal, casting long shadows that exaggerated the hollows in my face and the lean of my shoulders. The booth was abandoned, its glass clouded with the residue of time and breath. Yet the lamp over it stayed lit in a defiant, cinematic way, as if the world had kept that one object illuminated for me and me alone. I pressed the ticket to the varnished wood and felt the zero old pain and varnish under its edge. Around me the Carnival breathed, we lifting a loose poster, distant creaks of machinery, distorted music like something swallowed and replayed by a haunting shell. There was no triumphant resolution in that doorway, no sudden figure waiting with accusation, no cathartic confession delivered to the one who had been wronged. There was only the catastrophic quiet of understanding. Naming the truth had not removed it. It had given it shape. The lioness laughter threaded through the air as I backed away. The sound both mockery and benediction depending on where my fear chose to alight. I left ticket folded into the lining of my jacket, adding one more thing to the weight I already carried. I know the secret in a pocket next to cold metal and spare chair change and old receipts. The night settled into a slower rhythm after that. The midway retreated as if lowering a curtain on a scene where I had been the only actor. The banners drooped like seasonally exhausted witnesses, the mirrors dimmed the ordinary reflections, and the Ferris wheels tick-tock withdrew into the fog lion afterthought. There was no absolution here, only clarity that wouldn't like a wound for cleaning, necessary and painful. I understood that confession was not removal but rearrangement. A sorting of contents into boxes you hope will be smaller than the pie you made when you fled. When I finally stepped away, the fog thinned until the world folded back into the coarse textures of the city I had once called home. Streetlights smeared like tired candles. The last thing that clung to me from the midway was the bell's echo and the clown's patient stance, both now distant but placed somewhere tenderly and terrifyingly inside me. The ticket I had stowed in my jacket pressed against my rib like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I rubbed the scar along my left eyebrow with a thumb as if reaffirming continuity. The person who had come in would be the person who left. They both carried new knowledge. The Carnival had followed me because I was running from myself, and in the hall of mirrors it had finally made me stop. It had enforced a reckoning not because revenge touched a sweet but because some truth is to be left unexamined. When a place like this appears, for cooling at your feet, louder, not quite human, it is not always seeking punish. It is offering the most dangerous thing, a mirror that will not be ignored. I walked back into the city heavier than when I had come. The wrinkled against my palm as though the metal itself had absorbed some the night's chill and shame. Outside the midway, the city waited with its own lies and its own quiet complicities. Neighbors who pretended not to see, alleys where the past could be stored out of sight. Faces that kept his smile measured. I folded my hands into my pockets and kept walking into the thin, indifferent zone, feeling like someone who had been granted a moment in which the ledger was laid bare. The last thing the Carnival left me with was not an answer but the understanding that some places keep following you until you stop running. The logging clown stayed behind in the fog, a silhouette clapping slow, patient applause. Whether that applause was cruel or compassionate I could not say. I only knew I had been made to look, and that seeing was a kind of sentence. The dream closed around that knowledge with unresolved dread. The light went teal and thin, the Ferris wheel sighed like a promised to return. And a small blood-stained ticket sat in my pocket as proof that the encounter had been more than a dream. It might come back, the sound suggested, or it might wait a lifetime. Either way, its echo had found a place inside me where it would not be easily knocked loose. I kept walking until the tale blurred into the everyday life, a city that had forgotten how to be surprised, and in the space between steps it rehearsed, not forgiveness, but a long, careful work of facing what I did on. I found the ticket before I knew why it had come back. The paper folded into the hidden seam of my jacket, damp from the fog that had already been crawling around my feet, as if the night itself took care to return all small things to their owners. It was not a bright, festive stub. It was a strip of stock that had sopped and darkened at one corner, the ink smeared into a bloom that read like an accusation. A date stared up at me. The date matched a fragmented memory he had pried away from sight and shelved like brittle toys. And even where the street light fell on someone else's cheek and he had turned away before the apology could form on my tongue. The ticket felt like a summons. When the world had narrowed to the ribcage of that small, folded rectangle, the Carnival became less an arrangement of lights and rides and more a machine that had been calibrated to me. I could not place the first moment he had noticed it trailing in my life, but I could remember the impression of inevitability, the sense that a ledger was being kept elsewhere, that somewhere a counter marked at times it diverted my eyes. The ticket was stamped with time that had passed, and a gate I had avoided, and when I slid it into my palm the paper was warm as if it carried the memory of breath. I sheltered the rotting eve of the abandoned ticket booth, counting breaths and the slow tick of summiting metal inside my chest. The booth smelled of old varnish, of mildew and something sweet decayed, cotton candy gone sour, plastic clinging to a remembered hand. Neon bled through the slats, not bright enough to be comfortable, only enough to make the just float like planets caught in slow orbits. My fingers found the edge of a coater. My thumb traced a groove worn by 100 hands that might have been mine or might have belonged to strangers who had come seeking absolution and been given another form of a coating. They had left things here, little corners of significance. A coin, a photograph with a face scratched away, a chill's sure objects like prayers pinned to the memory of the place. The ticket was the smallest, and somehow the truest. It opened and closed like a mouth that remembered to sing. I felt the first unbidden heat of dread, the cane that settled under the ribs and made breath dense. I walked on, the midway a broken spine beneath the fog. The mirrors came next, an alley of glass hung like teeth in a dirty mouth. Each pane gave me back a version of myself I had not invited. A younger shape with its jaw taut, a heavier shadow bent by fatigue, a hollow that looked nearly hollow. At first the differences were small, the sorts of changes time etches into every face, eyes narrower, hair thinner. Then the pen began to arrange themselves into moments instead of eyes. One mirror caught the light and showed the street outside my childhood home, a night where laughter had been too loud and a hand had been shot away. Another offered me a fragment of a decision I had made behind a door I had chosen not to reopen. The mirrors, like the ticket, argued with the air of coincidence. Glass did not merely reflect, it remembered. In toy warped surfaces the past did not sit politely. It leaned forward and expected an answer. A face he recognized it with the jagged certainty of a scar turned from me. And for a moment I believed that if I stepped closer the reflection would turn back and we would both agree to the same story. But the glass refused to close the circle. It held the moment in a loop, forever caught between action and apology. Sound arrived from somewhere, a faint, distorted strain of music that could have once been merry. Was processed and wet, as though someone had taken an old gramophone recording and submerged it beneath water and laughter. From the periphery, a presence detached itself from the gloom. The lounging clown revealed a silhouette against the Ferris with a skeletal arc. Long limbs moving with deliberate, theatrical slowness. It did not rush. It had never needed to. Its approach carried the confidence of something that had waited patiently a long time. That first sound was theatrical and immediate. The clown clapped its hands in a slow, mocking metronome, the sound hollow and metallic. It did not speak. It did not need words to conduct the accounting. In the way it caught its head, in the manner it extended an arm and then withdrew it as if counting fingers, the creature dialogued me. Even at a distance its costume hung on its frame like a memory stretched too thin. The ruffled collar and the blood-dark body were worn by time and intent. The fake paint had fissures. The painted smile a brittle thing that did not reach the machine bright eyes. I felt exposed as if someone had opened in my quad and pinched out the lining of concealment. He moved away, and the midway did not press. The fair had room for her to tread or flee. It had lanes to funnel the unwilling back to the center. The carousel was an island among ruin, horses stalled in mid-act, tromsuled by salt and fog. A broken mirror leaned against one post, its frame cracked like a penitent's rib. He recognized the faces it gave me, a Euro version, narrower in the jaw, the eyes brimming with an unspent explanation. The mirror offered the moment he had been hiding from, a decision made in a half-lit kitchen, a choice to step back and let something happen rather than stop it. Memory arrived with the force of clarity, not the rounded recollection of time-altering detail, but the sharp blight of exactness. The younger self hands had been steady then, or so the mirror insisted. Our face had been turned away and not held. The carousel reflected the truth without mutation. The light on the glass was honest and indifferent. The punishment fitted the crime because the Carnival had been designed as a place that reduced its life to scales and balances. Each rhyme matched an error with a small precise torment. The mirror did not show guilt. It held the cold, patient record of one night's geometry. The pull to the center of the fairgrounds was not so much physical as gravitational. It tightened like a strap around the chest, bringing me inevitably toward the rusted gate that guarded the endmost right at the heart of the Carnival. Up close, the gate looked like an instrument of measurement, corrugated iron flaking in patterns that suggested script. The Ferris wheel loomed higher than memory. It spoke like the cogs of a clockwork that measured consequence. When I stood before the gate, the loving clown was closer now, only a few strides away. It moved with exaggerated deliberation. The bell at its hip chiming a noise that might have been merry in another life and now sounded like a toll. Everything else fell into a hush the moment he reached the threshold. Time contracted, pulled taut. The offer became visible in its simplest terms. A choice presented with the clarity of a blade. The ring I wore, a tarnished silver band, I had scarcely permitted myself to regard, suddenly seemed like the keystone of a structure I had been avoiding. The Carnival framed the decision plainly. Either I would hand it over and with it the confession that the ring silently represented, or I would close my hand and accept a penalty that the fair would assign with clinical exactness. There was no speech, only an exchange of intent. The clown's grin widened into something like triumph. It had no need to curse. It relied on the old geometry of shame. I felt ancient judgments unspool within me. The ledger of failing to act, the archive of withheld absolutions. The ring corresponded to a face I had not saved. It carried a weight I had been too self-preserving to live in the harsh light. Surrendering it felt like performing a confession in the open. Keeping it felt like an oath renewed to secrecy. I made the choice that clipped the chapter into a new shape. Whether humility or stubbornness guided my hand, the world shifted in response. If the ring left my finger, it did not fall like an object. It slid into a new place as if being rerouted on a conveyor. The Carnival acknowledged a letter entry with a small rearrangement of air. If the ring stayed, the fair tightened its coils and docked a penalty into the next fold of night. Either decision remade the geography of the place in specific ways. The loving clown adjusted its posture to fit the outcome, the smile pruning into satisfaction or growing curiosity. The immediate aftermath was a narrowing of possibilities. One reality expanded into confession and the other folded back into secrecy. The gates either opened in like a throat accepting a confession, or they solidified into a new perimeter that would keep a secret well ventilated. Some thickened or thinner depending on which transaction had occurred. The carousel's music may have found a new resolution, or the mirrors might have sharpened it into fresher accusation. Either way, the Carnival was an organism that accepted input and rewired itself accordingly. When it stumbled back toward the fair's edge, the ticket and the ring reigned as evidence. The booth where I had found the ticket received me like a scribe expecting a notation. The Carnival's architecture had the peculiar habit of preserving the objects that mattered, a given coin, a blood-smeared ticket, a worn wristband. Each item tracked where a decision had landed. Even as they threatened the horizon with a thin, ray suggestion of zone, the fog held like an old habit and the fairground's edge remained a liminal play where living felt like removing a bandage slowly instead of ripping it away. The loving clown lingered in the distance, a punctured silhouette against the Ferris wheel. Its breathing was a sound like someone laughing through a mouthful of keys. Even as he moved away, it seemed to catalog me yet. The uneven way my shoulders had tightened. There was a hunger under that amusement, not simply an appetite for spectacle, but for continuity. A need to ensure that choices remained recorded, and that the ledger was always balanced. The Carnival had been following me for longer than he had remembered, and now I understood that waiting was its art. It left with something altered. The booth's threshold written it as send-up notes, damp fabric, cold ozone, the fine spoon sugar of the fair. The ticket slipped back into a pocket as a stub of memory that would not dissolve. If I had confessed and let go of the ring, the confession settled like a sediment that might yet erode in time. If I had held on, screwy braided tighter around the chest. Either way, the knowledge that the Carnival had been patient enough to await my breakdown reshaped how I understood my past and my future. The world no longer seemed merely a sequence of accidents. It felt engineered to return me again and again until full accounting had been rendered. Zone did not strip the place of its menace. Light bled into the fog but could not wash away the sense that a page had been turned, another already open. The ticket, the mirrors, the clown. Each element was a hint at a larger mechanism that had been set to click precisely when I could no longer avoid the calculus of my own life. I walked away with the uneasy certainty that I would hear that elevator again, a sound that promised not closure but continuation. The Carnival had done what it was meant to do. Present inevitable. Mark the choice and then achieve the consequence for the next time he refused to reconcile who I was with what I had done. There is a margin in which one understands that leaving a place does not mean extricating oneself from the debt it has recorded. The pharaohs receded into fog and shape, and in that receding I felt the long hand of inevitability tracing the route of a future return. The loving clown-esque silhouette shrank until it was only suggestion. The rusted gate remained where it had always been, an instrument waiting politely for me to consider it again. The ticket warmed in my pocket, and whether a confession softened its edges or secrecy made it burn, the stub would be a constant. An index finger pressed into the score the Carnival wrote against my name. Even now, as the city reasserts its banal geometry around me, the memory of metal and bell and cracked plate resists integration. It sits like a seed under a fingernail where it will chafe. The morning feels uncertain. as if the day could tilt and fall back into the midway at any moment. I know the carnival was never merely a place for other people. It was a waiting room designed for those who turned away when it mattered. The ticket and the gate were instruments of inevitability, and I have learned that such instruments keep good time. The rest of my day will proceed, coffee bitter, an email chain that can be deleted, faces I will avoid in elevators. But the knowledge of that rusted gate will not leave me. It will be like a shadow in the periphery, patient, recurring process. The logging clone will not be satisfied with a single accounting. It gives ledgers for those who run, and it catalogs the ways we avoid confession. I have a ticket now, and I hold a ring. Both are proofs that the carnival follows, that waiting is its practice and inevitability its motive. In the small hour, sleep comes thin, and my hands wander to nothing. I will find the band fingered by habit, and the stub pressed between thumb and palm like a talisman. It will remind me of the gate and the choice, and which shaped me life, took when measured against our places in to demand an answer. I walked away that morning knowing the truth, turning me back on what a mattered had bought me a net of fare, but not a pardon. The carnival asks reckonings in ways that ordinary laws does not. It demands a decision and records it meticulously. And I know now, as the city wakes and the thins into the ordinary grey of roofs and traffic, that the ledger is patient. It will keep my entry safe until it returns or until it finds me again. The laughter will follow, and the bell will ring, and the gate will be waiting with its particular offer. I cannot say whether what I gave or kept will ever feel like atonement. I can only say this: the carnival has been following me for years, and it will not let me leave its accounting unfinished. I find myself waking on the midway with fog at my boots and a brittle ticket folded in my palm. The air tastes ozone and old spoon sugar, a thin metallic tongue that makes the back of my throat ache as if at the edge of an incoming storm. Neon washes around me as if remembering a it unloved and is trying desperately to keep that memory alive. The ticket is thin, its edges softened and finely feathered by age and use, stamped in a hand that knows certain dates and nothing else. I hold it as if it could make itself explainable, as if paper could offer apology or accusation, and immediately a question claws at the back of my teeth. Who has been following home? The question is at once childish and precise, the kind of query you get when you wake in a place that both remembers you and refuses to speak plainly. Lights pulse slow and hungry, Iqbal dropping a fraction of warmth into the wet night. The midway is a ribbon of small lumens. Some glow with the thoughtful burn of old theater bulbs, others flicker like the last breath of a candle. Above everything, the Ferris wheel turns with deliberate, ancient patience. It carries small theater of memory, rhyming in condensation, framing moments as if they were scenes meant to be watched and judged. This place is familiar in ways it had been careful to avoid. The shapes and fit into fractures it have kept glued shut for years, and there is a startling intimacy in that fit, not tenderness, but the uncanny recognition you feel when an old house settles around the sound of your breathing. The midway smells of rust and popcorn, of hot tar and a sweetness that curdles as soon as it touches the tongue. It is a scent that is at once nostalgic and rancid, like a memory left too long in the sun. I took the ticket into the pocket of my worn jacket, the fabric jammed against my palm, and tried to walk forward without announcing myself. My steps are slow and a little wary. Each footfall seems to disturb something settled and echo, a small animal, a ghost. It feels if the carnival has been holding its breath for me. I drift past stalls whose printed posters are warped like slide left too long in the sun. The ink has bled where rain once fell. The faces in the photograph have faded edges, but the smile and hands are stubbornly intact. Faces melt into frames. The laugh I sometimes want to remember. A hand refused to hold, a living he pretended not to see because to see it would have meant numbing it. Each image nudges a memory he had carefully edited out of the sequence of my life, and the nudges gather like teeth at the corners of my mouth, The price shelf stocked up with things that mean too much. A cracked porcelain figurine with someone else's initials inked into the base. A chilled chair with a scarf identical to the one I still carry in my nightmares. I recognize a scarf the way one recognizes a scar, a shortened for an event borrowed from conversation. The pageants of the carnival is not casual. It has catalogue with me. The revelation moves to me not as a shock but as inevitability and own inexorable tilt of a scale I have long avoided looking at. There is no malice in this cataloging, not exactly. It is similar, more efficient. Things that are kept a long time learn to wait. They learn when you will be soft enough to open your hands. A ledger waits in an abandoned ticket booth like a patient organ. The paper is thin and reeking faintly of mildew. Edges fit red like the ticket in my pocket. My name is scrawled across one page in a hand I almost recognize. The loops and slants of a version of my own signature twisted by years of denial. The ink had let where the hand lingered, creating a ghost of the shapes I once met with the same pen. Beside the name runs a string of dates, each one matching a night I ran, a night I hid. Some dates are clean and clear. Others are smudged, as if someone had anticipated a tear or a hurry tomb. The ledger's columns line up with the map of my avoidance. Credit, debit, balance. Nice is tired, nice I left, nice I promised to myself I would do better. The implication presses into my ribs like a palm turning a key. If the carnival has been tracking me, then it has been patient enough to wait for the moment I could no longer hide from myself. Light hair comes in staged small pieces. A lamp over the booth casts a sickly teal. A string of boobs drags a thin halo across hand-lettered prices. Shadows bite into the folds of fabric and paper, marking modes where the light will not cross. The booth's window has a crack that runs like a scar across the glass, a line jagged and definite, and dust hovers in the air making micro-constellations in the lamplight. I run a thumb along the indentation of my name, feeling the zen in the paper as if it might be a map forward or back. A brittle bell rings somewhere far inside the carnival's ribs, a small, rusted sound that answers a summons I never heard being made. There is a figure waiting by the Ferris wheel, tall and tall precisely staged. Long limbs folded in an exaggerated repose, head tipped at an impossible angle, collar ruffled like a state prop kept too long. The loving clown stands in the glow of backlit boobs, a silhouette of decayed showmanship. His costume is a collage of history. Fabric gone lacy with age, paint that cracked and healed in ridges. When it moves it does so with the heavy, ceremonial grace of someone who has been rehearsing cruelty forever. Its motion is practice, like the bow one gives at the end of a performance, and when they already know the applause will be forced. His smile is painted in chipped strokes, an aggressive white that knows no fineness. Its eyes are a pair of glowing hollows that hold the motion of a chambered clock. When it lifts a rusted bell and offers a seat in a Ferris car, the gesture reads less like hospitality and more like an appointment I had been running late for 4 years. I take the car as if controlled by the same patient force that assembled the carnival around me. There is a pull to the seat, a weight to the leather that understands my form. Weakly, the world narrows into a ring of light and fog, and with each creak the panorama becomes a sequence of moments from the night it broke. Small things come forward with the clarity of relics. The scuff on a stair that hooks me memory like a fish hook. The tilt of a portlight that made something look smaller than it was. The way a voice differed as if deferral could make the moment disappear. The Ferris car is a dark box with a window that frames the past in moving slices. Frames that had once been blurry from my willful skipping now sharpened. Edges defined by a light that seems destined to make me see. Compulsion and nausea fight in me gut as the truth assembles itself around me like gears meshing. There are no spectators in these scenes, only an audience of one, precisely in its accusation. I watch a version of myself in fractured frames. Hands that hesitated, eyes that looked away faster than the truth could follow, knots left unloosed where conversation should have been. Memory revs not as steady recollection but as film strips threaded to a apparatus that refuses to stop. Each snapshot carry the smell of itself. Spilled beer, someone else's fume, rain against a window. A chill slaughter echoes in one reel, bright and careless, then hardened to something else in the next. The sound sits on top of everything like a smear of oil, impossible to clean. At the apex, the cat tilts forward and my breath catches. The other seat is occupied by a silhouette that is not a stranger but a warped reflection of the person it betrayed. The features are wrong in the way of memory when it has been steeped and reshaped, enough to be recognizable and enough to be monstrous. The outline of a shoulder, the angle of a jawline, a way someone used it to mess their hair when they were thinking, all those banalities are present and wrong. Like a photograph printed on the wrong paper. The laughing clown stands at the wheel's center, a ringleader and executioner at once. Its bell rings with ceremonial clarity. The carnival forces me to name what is it not want to name, and the act of naming is less declaration than incision. The admission, when it comes, break through the careful numbness I have worn like armor. I feel the weight of what I have been carrying fall into a new shape, not lighter, not freed, but rearranged so there is no comfortable place to tuck the fragments. The confession does not unfurl as salvation. Instead it becomes currency the carnival consumes. Relief curdles into a new dread. The act of naming is cataloged, stamped, filed, something in the mechanism of the place takes that truth and uses it to tighten a design it had only half understood. The wheel descends and what the midway below recontextualizes itself. The prizes, the posters, even the ledger seem to settle like bones into a new anatomy that includes me by force. I want to say more about what I saw in that car, to give the illusions names beyond good and shame, but the carnival is picky about language. It allows me imagine sensations, not need explanations. There is a flash of a porchlight oat paint flaking, and the morning after where the coffee went cold. There is a hand left on a doorknob and then not there. Here is a photograph slid into an envelope and then never sent. Details accumulate in the same way just, and their presence is the proof of time that passed without the making of amends. At the front of the booth, behind a stack of old ticket stubs, there is a pile of tickets stamped with my name over and over. A small mountain of ritual tokens. Each bears a different date, many of them nice I remember fleeing and nice is or not. Some days, much moments of shame I could recall too easily. Others are like cold drafts blown across a bed I thought I had warmed. The rusted bell rings as the answering some distant conductor. A shadow retreats into the fog, the loving clown's silhouette dissolving into teal and red, and the final image that lands onto me is of its hand raising the bell, as if promising the nightmare is not finished and will be resumed at an appointed hour. There's the lies like a heartbeat. You can feel the source of your shoes. A metallic creak here, a distant laughter, the soft scuff of canvas as the tent settle. I move through it with the slow, careful steps, so I'm learning that their feet are no longer entirely their own. The midway stretches behind me and opens before me like a throat. I have carried these pieces of myself for so long that I have found corners in the carnival only to be dusted off now and displayed. Each rye remembers me as an old town remembers its dead, precise and indifferent. It does not ask keenly, it registers. It does not forgive, it arranges. Memory here has weight and shape, rooms of recollection compact into compartments of the Ferris car, the carousel, the booth. Even the games keep score of what he avoided. A ring toss haunts the arc of a promise is robbed, the trajectory frozen into an elegant parabola that never met its peg. A shooting gallery offers targets that are photographs I once swore to protect. The prizes hang heavy live verdicts on pegs and nails. The carnival does not ask for what I owe. It shows me the leisure and expects me to understand the arithmetic. There is an intimacy to being remembered this way that is harder than being forgotten. It requires me to see how long I let things go unspoken, to trace every step that led me to where I now sit under boobs arranged like careful teeth. The past is never a single scene here. It is a sequence, a machine in which one lever moves another until the entire apparatus is in motion again. I feel smaller and more exposed with every cog that turns, and yet there is a terrible clarity in this exposure. The outlines of my choices are visible in the stark chiaroscuro like the midway favors. Where once I may have blurred my edges, here I am in high relief, every contour mapped out. Once, I thought confession would be a river that carried me clean. I imagined it saying the words and letting them wash me down to a place where things wept and then healed. In the car at the top, I learned that confession here is a toll. I hand over what I was sure would be my surrender and find instead that the Carnival stamps me with a new mark. It rearranges the angles of good into displays, keeps souvenirs of my ownership in the booths and on the price shelves. I leave the ride not relieve it but catalogue it, and then repeat it until it becomes part of the place architecture. I walk away with the feeling that I have become a module in a machine that measures and converts pain into spectacle. I wander toward the back of the booth where Zon is an actor struggling to pull its curtain through the fog. Pale light tries to cut the deal, but the Carnival resists full daylight the way a stage keeps its shadows. Zon here is tentative, as if it is rehearsing how to look honest. The pile of tickets bearing my name is a small mountain, it a ritual token of nice, I have circled like a hound. A bell rings once more, and this time the sound sits in my chest like a promised bruise, an etchy that will not leave until it is acknowledged. The loving clown-esque silhouette retreats, not in defeat but with the careful singing of a showman bowing to an applause he can never stop hearing. There is no finality in what passes here. The confession did not collapse the Carnival nor did it free me. What it did was fold me more precisely into the descent, a piece placed where the machinery could best use the weight. I am left with the sense that admission was not an exit but another entrance, a doorway that swings one direction only. The fog swallows the edge where the Ferris wheel recedes, and the ticket in my pocket feels suddenly heavier, like currency that weighs nothing but more time inside the same room. It presses into me with the intimacy of a secret you cannot help but carry. I move away not with the confidence of someone ready-made but the careful, hollowed steps of someone who has been reorganized. The midway watches me leave in the way an old photograph watches some walk away unmoved, knowing the shape they will assume in the future. The ladder of the Carnival tucks itself into the corners of the fog and follows me a few paces. A ribbon of sound I can almost catch with my fingers. It is not laughter that makes me shrink. It is the peculiar accuracy of the place's memory, the way it keeps ledger and pry, bell and beam, as certainty were a salable good. Outside the midway, the world is ordinary and bright with morning cars. A milk truck whistles in the distance, a neighbor sweeps a stoop, the sky is a hard, indifferent blue. Inside me, the morning feels like a light pressed to fit a face it cannot quite mimic. The bell's echo fades into the undercurrent of my day, but it does not leave quietly. Each ordinary sound arrives with a residue of something else. The metallic creak of a ride, the distant laugh, the whisper of vapor against leather. Habit is contaminated now. Even the mundane seems get to a memory. There is a ticket folded in my jacket pocket. In daylight it looks ridiculous, a relic from a night that should have been left behind. At night it becomes a key, a small soft thing that opens certain doors. It traces edge and feels the indentation of my name, the script that proves the Carnival has been keeping time with me for years. I do not know if we'll go back. I do know that the knowledge is now lodged in me like a stone. It will shift when prodded and will make sound when I move it. It will roll against other stones, Jeff, Mark. Sometimes I think of throwing away, ditching the weight, but that would be an act that requires certainty is not possess. As I fall into my small, working life, I carry with me the taste of ozone and the after image of boss and a bell that is still ringing somewhere in the distance. The rise remember, they remember the nice. I wake to the taste of metal and spoon sugar, to damp fabric press, to a cheek that no longer remember how it should sleep. The fog is immediate, crawling, unfamiliar in the way good can be familiar, cooling around my feet, muffling the soles of my shoes as if the ground itself were reluctant to let me go. Neon hangs where there should be nothing but a shuttered street, a doorway of flickering boots spelling no name but promising the same old promise. A place that appears when running ends. There is a marquee above, half-burned letters filing like teeth. The light splutters into ocean and bruised red, rim light catching the edge of the leather jacket I've worn for years until it has molded to me like a second skin. My hands are empty until a movement at the ticket booth draws them. A small window, glass clouded with grime, frames a single thing, an old ticket folded and tucked against just. It flutters if something breathes near it. Is stained dark at one corner, a shame-shaped like a stain, a rich. My fingers close around the paper, and the paper closes something inside me that had been held open for so long. The booth smells damp wood, old varnish, and an undercurrent of something metallic, might be blood or rust. A tail lantern hangs over a counter, casting a halo that makes the ticket look colder than it should. I unfold it with deliberate slowness. The crease is familiar. I remember the way paper once in me for a pocket had been around the ring I kept hidden in me fist. The memory is a splinter, small at first, then drag it. I tested the scene that made the fold. A hand turned away, a decision made in a breath, a step and then the absence left behind. I have been good at forgetting. The carnival is better at remembering. The midway is an edge of silhouettes, broken boots, a Ferris wheel that loomed like a rusted constellation. Boots with pink peels in the pattern of old apologies. The fog clings to the base of each ride, pulling like spilled thoughts. Distorted music leaked from somewhere, a carousel calliope warped into a lush of notes, and with it laughter. The sound undulates, always a cadence behind my pulse. I move forward because my feet obey before my mind decides. An irresistible compulsion draws me deeper. There is a stubborn gravity to confession, and I am small and obeying it. The loving comes from mirrors. He does not appear as must peel his way into being, a reflection that refuses to match mine until the glass shows me what I have refused to name. He stepped from pen to pen in a hallway of warped mirrors and half-lit booths, his lanky limbs saturated by fractured reflections. Each mirror redraws a memory on its surface, moments he traded with justifications and took it in the dark. The clown applauds without hands and every clap echoes like a ledger closing. He does not move in the same time as me. He moves in a long, patient act, the patience of debt collector and broken clocks. There is a hall of rise that feel like rooms he used to avoid. A carousel with horses are plasters he knew, a funhouse of warped glass where me silhouette stretches into shame. A tunnel where the lights blink in a way that mimics my heartbeat. The clown opens it right like a ledger, and the rise remember more faithfully than I have ever managed it to. He lifts a mirror and the reflection that blooms a memory unmarked by excuses. A life folded like a ticket, an absence that had weight, a promise I had been until it cracked. I watch each reply as if watching someone else fail. The barrier between witness and participant thins until it is paper thin and 10 gaps. At the derelict carousel, the horses move without sound, their wooden bodies glassy with fog. Each animal squat where a smear of a name I recognized too late. A friend left under a breath, a sibling of circumstance, the small betrayals that accumulate lightly until they become a burden. The carousel forces them one by one. Tiny betrayal unspool into a pattern, and that pattern reads like a map to the moment I first slip. I pressed my palms to the railing and the paint flakes, leaving powder that hints at the edge of what I thought I could bury. Memory after memory replays against my will, and the steadiness beneath my feet begins to give. The boards sag as if the weight of each drilled moment were measured in inches of rot. I run because running feels like an act to understand. I bought for the rusted gate at the midway's edge, convinced that the motion itself is absolution. The pathways fold and loop. I turn and find the same booth twice, a corridor that digests me and coughs me back out near the carousel. Every exit seems engineered to return me to the booth or to mirrors or to the clown. My hands find the ring in me pocket, the small tarnished silver band that has sat there like a residue of a life I have been unwilling to name aloud. The ring is one from my palm, as it carries someone's own heat and not mine. On the edge of the midway, the gate yawns open like a wound. Beyond it, the world is ordinary. A strip of pavement, a lamppost whose bulb flickers in a measured indifference. I imagine stepping to unliving. For breath, I believe in the illusion that crossing the threshold will return me to a life unmarked. The laugh comes from behind me then. Not a single laugh, but lyric chorus, a hissing some lute undercut beyond echoing rest. The clown fills the gate with his height, crimson hair hallowed in the teal backlight, a stretched painted smile that is so real. He is patient enough to let me decide and cruel enough to take that decision as permission. Standing at the threshold, I can no longer pretend that the memory is not mine. The truth is a slow thing. It widens like a crack through a pane of glass. I remember the night the ticket was folded, the angle of light when I left, the way someone had looked back, and how the look folded into itself and was gone. The first full admission is less a scream than a conceding a breath. It arrived as a small, terrible unthreading of everything I had held doggedly together. I named the moment in the privacy of my chest. The admission breaks something in the carnival, a recall pulley releasing. The lounging clown marks me like a bell. He draws a rusted brass bell from his squat and rings it once. The sound is small, but it reverberates through midway in the way a boy remembers an echo. The booth stood in perspective. The mirrors shiver as if a hand has run down their back. A ticket materializes between my fingers, folded and warm and impossibly real. It is folded the same way as the ticket in the booth, but this one bears an impression, a stain where the paper had been pressed by a different hand. The ticket is not simply proof of passage. It is the carnival's ledger, a tiny contract that records the true shape of what is it. They measure good hair in small things. The ring on my finger, the crease of a ticket, the smell of cotton candy that turns sour in the mouth. Each detail becomes a cipher. I feel something placed beneath my skin, a worm like a coin sliding into a pocket. The carnival's claim is not physical the way one imagines. It is a change in the gravity that governs me life. The world returns to ordinary shapes, and it carries the weight of a mark in muscle and memory. I check my hands. The silver ring is warmer. The ticket sits in me caught like an ember. The midway shutters close with a sound like a throat clearing. The clown retreats to the shadow between boobs, his silhouette receding into the Ferris wheel's outline. For a few steps, daylight pushes against the fog. The Ferris wheel shrinks, its silhouette losing detail until it's a suggestion of circles. I walk the short distance to the street and it feels, for a moment, like leaving. Streetlights flicker and a car passes, its tires hissing on wet pavement, an ordinary noise that seems obscene after the carnival estate tempo. The ticket in my pocket grows heavy if sand has gathered in its fibers. The ring is suddenly warm and then cold in the same breath, an echo of a pulse that is no longer entirely mine. The world has the normal cadence of afternoons, but under my skin the inevitability of return sits like a small, slow drum. I find myself watching reflections in shop windows, searching for the green that belongs to the clown. I do not see him, only the shadow of my own jaw and the permanent crease beneath my left eyebrow. At random moments, my hands go to the small tarnished ring and the faded wristband folded over my watch strap, relics that hum like low warning beacons. The carnival did not remove me from the world, it grafted something to me. The ticket was not only a record, it is a climb, an itinerary the carnival keeps. The zest is it not confess, the names if failed to speak, the small betrayals that grew into architecture. Each night since, I find myself listening for laughter at the edges of ordinary noise. The passers-by word chuko is the wrong pitch. The tinkle of a far-off kettle that becomes a calliope. The hollow of a subway red where breath leaks like a chorus. Sometimes, in the hush of my apartment, I can hear a bell like the one the clown rang. It is not loud, it is a punctuation. The memory of the moment I finally named me truth, and the world changed the way a body changes after a fever. Awake with the same taste in me mouth and the same fog at my feet, not always present, but there in the way a scar is present under the skin. Less visible than once, but no less real. The final horse in the carnival did not feel conclusive. There was no neat resolution, only ritual and marking and the removal of pretense. The clown's grin is lodged at the periphery of my vision like a promise that I did not ask for and could not refuse. The ticket falls into my life like a saturated seam. It will not fade with time. Sometimes I feel it under the cuff of my jacket as if it were still warm from the midway at lamps. That warmth is both comfort and indictment. A place I went on name what I had done and a place that kept a record of the naming. I tell myself that confession will be freedom, but the carnival dogmatic admission is only the start of measurement. The ledger does not vanish because a page is bent. The clown's pleasure is patient. His work is not in destruction but in accounting. He follows those who run from themselves and waits for the moment their running stops. I have learned that the waiting is long, and the final ticket is never simply a piece of paper. It is an incision and a joining. It's a record that will hum in the margins of my days and pull at my decisions like tie. Daylight flattens the sharpness of the midway in me memory, but the textures remain. The grey film grain in the air, the teal wash of lice under skin, the red accents that always seemed to underline what I had tried to erase. I find myself chewing the small scar along my left eyebrow with the tip of a finger the way one touches a map to see if the rod still holds. Each time I cock the ringworms, each time I hold the ticket it falls into my palm like something alive. The carnival recedes, but it does not leave. It sits somewhere in the ordinary and inevitably folded into the architecture of my life. I do not know whether the marking is punishment or mercy. The laughing clown's face not one of simple malice. It is a ringleader's satisfaction and an archivist's still. He opened the mirrors and let me see. He rang the bell and recorded my name. He left me with ticket that will not come undone. Whether I return by choice or by the pull of that small paper folded in my pocket. Whether I walk back to the midway in surrender or in search of more confession, I cannot say. There is a promise in the way the clown slipped back into shadow, a promise that the carnival waits for those who can no longer run. For now I carry the weight of it as quickly as one carries a secret. The city keeps its ordinary rhythms around me slow, new gravity. When the night is still and the world hushes, I become aware of the green at me periphery and of the inevitability braided under my skin. I learned the hardest thing. That naming does not end the story. It begins a new economy of living with what has been recorded. I fold the ticket into the inner pocket of my jacket and feel its outline. It is small and dense and alive. The loving clown receded into the Ferris wheel like a silhouette closing its eyes. I do not think the carnival expected me to be holy afterward. It wanted honesty and it wanted cataloging. It wanted me to understand that some sins are not expiated by distance, but are held as contracts that the world will honor. I step into afternoons with a new waking. Every laugh that lingers at the wrong pitch, every bell that rings like memory. And the knowledge that the final ticket is not only a thing I possess, but a thing that now possesses a place in my life. The inevitability sits beneath me skin like a promise written in the negative spaces of my days. The corridor keep opening. When I sleep I dream in the carnival's color palette, till fog, chain rim lights and small, bloody red accents like punctuation. Sometimes I wake to the soft rumble of distant drums, and think I hear the clapping of a hand that never touched me. I carry the tarnished ring and the folded ticket, and I wear both life proof that I have crossed a threshold. The world seems unchanged, and yet I know better. The ledger exists, the mark has been blessed, and the loving clown is patient. The last thing I hear before the line of sleep tightens is the smallest bell, a punctuation that both closes and promises return. The nightmare does not end. It waits, and when anxiety feels wrong or my own courage fails, the carnival will be there again, lights flickering, waiting for the moment I can no longer hide from myself.